The moment that destroys your entire world doesn't always come with warning signs. Sometimes it arrives on a regular Tuesday afternoon while you're shopping for anniversary gifts at the mall. Sometimes it comes when you round the corner into the baby section of a department store and see your husband of 6 years holding up tiny onesies, laughing with a pregnant woman who isn't you. Sometimes it comes when that pregnant woman rubs her round belly and your husband leans down to kiss it like it's the most natural thing in the world. Simone Mitchell felt her shopping bag slip from her fingers and hit the floor. The sound echoed in her ears, but neither Brandon nor the woman noticed. They were too busy picking out matching family outfits, a little blue romper, a shirt that said "Daddy's Boy," and a woman's dress that would fit over a pregnant belly. Her legs wouldn't move. Her breath caught somewhere between her throat and her chest. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be Brandon, her Brandon, the man who held her every night and promised her that their time for a baby would come soon. The man who told her just last week that they should stop trying so hard, that the stress was probably why she wasn't getting pregnant. The pregnant woman was laughing now, holding up a pair of tiny shoes. She was pretty, younger than Simone's 32 years, with long braids and a yellow dress that hugged her belly. 7 months, maybe 8. Which meant this had been going on for almost a year, maybe longer. Simone's hand found her phone in her purse. Her fingers shook as she opened the camera app. She stepped behind a clothing rack, keeping herself hidden while she recorded. Brandon was touching the woman's face now, wiping away what looked like happy tears. The woman leaned into his palm like she'd done it 1,000 times before. "We need to get the crib too," Simone heard the woman say. Her voice was sweet, soft. "And I was thinking we could paint the nursery that blue color you liked." "Whatever you want, baby," Brandon said. "I want our son to have everything." Our son. The words cut through Simone like glass. She and Brandon had been trying for 3 years. 3 years of negative pregnancy tests, of fertility appointments, of her crying in the bathroom while he held her and promised they'd keep trying. 3 years of him saying he wanted nothing more than to be a father. And here he was, already about to be one. Just not with her. The woman kissed Brandon and he kissed her back without hesitation. His hand rested on her belly, protective and tender. Simone had dreamed of that moment, had imagined Brandon touching her pregnant stomach that way. Now she was watching him do it with someone else. She recorded for 5 full minutes. Watched them pick out bottles and blankets. Watched Brandon pull out his wallet and pay for everything with a credit card she didn't recognize. Watched him load the bags into a cart while the woman linked her arm through his. "Should we grab lunch before we head to the apartment?" the woman asked. "Yeah, and we can stop by that furniture store too," Brandon replied. "I want to make sure everything's perfect before he gets here." The apartment. He had an apartment with her. This wasn't just an affair. This was a whole other life. Simone's hands were steady now, her shock turning into something cold and sharp. She followed them from a distance as they left the store, still recording. She watched them get into Brandon's car, the car she helped him pick out 2 years ago. She watched him open the door for the pregnant woman, watched him buckle her seatbelt for her like she was precious cargo. When they drove away, Simone stood in the parking lot for a long time. The sun was too bright. The sky was too blue. Everything looked exactly the same as it had an hour ago, but her entire world had been ripped apart. She got into her own car and sat there, staring at the video on her phone. Watching it again. And again. Making sure it was real. Making sure she hadn't imagined the whole thing. It was real. All of it. Brandon had told her this morning that he had back-to-back meetings all day. That he'd be home late. That she shouldn't wait up. How many times had he said that over the past year? How many nights had she eaten dinner alone, believing he was working hard for their future? Simone opened her text messages and scrolled through their conversation history. All his sweet messages, all his promises. "Can't wait to come home to you. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. I love you more than anything." What? Every single word was a lie. She started the car and drove home on autopilot. Their house, the beautiful 4-bedroom house they'd bought together 3 years ago, looked like a picture from a magazine. She'd decorated it carefully, had made sure every room was perfect. One of those bedrooms was supposed to be a nursery. She'd already painted it soft green, already bought a rocking chair that sat in the corner, waiting. Simone walked through the front door and set her purse down. The house was quiet. Too quiet. She could hear the clock in the hallway ticking, counting down the seconds until Brandon came home and lied to her face again. But not tonight. Tonight she wasn't going to pretend everything was fine. Tonight she was going to start figuring out exactly how deep this betrayal went. And then she was going to make sure Brandon regretted every single lie he'd ever told her. She went upstairs to Brandon's home office. The room he always kept locked when he wasn't in it. She'd never questioned it before. He said he needed privacy for work calls, for confidential business documents. Now she wondered what else he was hiding. The door was locked, but Simone knew where he kept the spare key. She'd seen him hide it months ago in the hallway closet behind some old boxes. She retrieved it now and opened the office door. His desk was neat, organized. But Simone wasn't looking for papers. She was looking for the truth. She started opening drawers, searching through files. In the bottom drawer, under a stack of folders, she found a phone. A second phone she'd never seen before. Her hands shook as she picked it up. It wasn't password protected. When she opened it, the first thing she saw was the message thread with a contact saved as C. Hundreds of messages. Photos. Videos. All the evidence she needed to confirm what she'd seen at the mall wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a relationship. This was love, or whatever Brandon thought love was. Simone sat down in his desk chair and started reading. Every message made her stomach turn. Made her anger grow. Made her more determined to make sure he lost everything. Because that's exactly what he was about to do. Simone sat at Brandon's desk until the sun went down, reading through every message on the secret phone. Her eyes burned from crying and from staring at the screen, but she couldn't stop. She needed to know everything. The affair had started exactly 2 years and 3 months ago. Candace worked as a receptionist at one of the companies Brandon did business with. Their first messages were friendly, professional. Then they turned flirty. Then they turned into late-night conversations. Then they turned into, "I can't stop thinking about you." 6 months in, they had their first date. 8 months in, Candace sent a message saying she loved him. Brandon had replied, "I love you too. I wish things were different. I wish I'd met you first." Simone's throat tightened. She remembered that time. That was right after her second miscarriage. She'd been devastated, barely able to get out of bed. And Brandon had been so supportive, or so she thought. He'd held her while she cried. He'd told her they'd keep trying. He'd promised her they'd have a family someday. All while texting another woman that he wished he'd met her first. The messages continued. Brandon complained about Simone, said she was too focused on getting pregnant, that the pressure was too much. Candace comforted him. Told him he deserved better. Told him he deserved to be happy. Then came the message from 7 months ago, "I'm pregnant." Brandon's response, "Are you serious? That's amazing. I'm going to be a dad." No hesitation. No panic. Just pure joy. The kind of joy he'd never shown when Simone told him about her positive pregnancy tests, the ones that ended in heartbreak weeks later. Simone scrolled through the photos. Pictures of Candace's growing belly. Pictures of Brandon kissing her stomach. Pictures of them at dinner, at the movies, at the beach. A whole relationship she knew nothing about. There were pictures of an apartment too. A small one-bedroom with furniture Simone didn't recognize. The messages explained it. Brandon had rented it 4 months ago. He was paying for it, paying for everything Candace needed. The medical bills, the baby items, the groceries. All with money that should have been theirs. She found the bank statements in another drawer. A checking account she didn't know existed. Brandon had been transferring money from their business into this secret account every month for over a year. Thousands of dollars. Money that belonged to both of them, money from the event planning company Simone had built from nothing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Brandon, "Stuck in a meeting. Won't be home until late. Love you." Simone stared at the message. Then she looked at the secret phone. A text from Candace came through, "Can you bring dinner? The baby's been kicking all day and I'm exhausted." Brandon's reply, "On my way now. Love you both." Both phones said "love you." Both women thought they had him. But only one of them was about to lose everything. Simone took photos of every document she found. She photographed the bank statements, the lease agreement for the apartment, the credit card bills showing purchases for baby items and jewelry and dinners at expensive restaurants. She backed up all the messages from the secret phone to her computer. Every single one. Then she put everything back exactly as she'd found it. The phone went back in the drawer, covered with folders. The papers went back in their files. She locked the office and returned the key to its hiding spot. In her own bedroom, Simone sat on the bed she shared with Brandon and made a list. She needed a lawyer. She needed to secure her business. She needed to make sure Brandon couldn't take anything else from her. And she needed to do it all without him knowing until it was too late. Her best friend Nicole answered on the first ring. "Hey girl. How's the anniversary gift shopping going?" Simone's voice broke. "Can you come over? I need you." 20 minutes later, Nicole was sitting on the couch, watching the mall video in silence. When it ended, she looked at Simone with fury in her eyes. I'm going to kill him. No, Simone said firmly. I have a better plan. You work at that law firm downtown. Who's the best divorce attorney there? Nicole didn't hesitate. Patricia Okonkwo. She's ruthless. Doesn't lose. But she's expensive. I don't care what she costs. Can you get me a meeting with her? I'll call her first thing tomorrow morning. Nicole grabbed Simone's hand. We're going to destroy him. Legally. They stayed up until midnight, going through all the evidence Simone had gathered. The messages, the bank statements, the photos. Nicole, who worked as a paralegal, knew exactly what they needed. This isn't just infidelity, Nicole said, pointing at the bank statements. This is financial misconduct. He's been stealing from the business. That's fraud. And if you can prove the company was primarily yours before marriage, you might be able to keep it entirely. It was mine, Simone said. I started it 5 years before we got married. He was working at a marketing firm when we met. I hired him to help with events after we got engaged. Do you have documents proving that? Everything. The original business license, the tax returns from those years. It's all in my name. Nicole smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone planning war. Then we've got him. Patricia is going to love this case. After Nicole left, Simone lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about confronting Brandon when he got home. Thought about screaming, throwing things, demanding answers. But that wouldn't accomplish anything. He'd make excuses. He'd apologize. He'd promise to change. And nothing would happen except he'd know she'd discovered his secret. No. She needed to be smart about this. She needed to hit him where it would hurt most. His reputation, his finances, his freedom. He'd betrayed her in the worst way possible. Now she was going to make sure he paid for it. Around midnight, she heard Brandon's car in the driveway. She turned off her bedside lamp and pretended to be asleep. She heard him come upstairs, heard him brush his teeth in the bathroom. He slipped into bed beside her and kissed her shoulder. Love you, babe, he whispered. Simone didn't respond. She kept her breathing steady, kept her body still. Inside she was screaming. Inside she was already planning his downfall. Brandon fell asleep within minutes, his arm draped across her waist like he always did. Like everything was normal. Like he hadn't just spent the evening with his pregnant girlfriend. Like he wasn't living a double life. Simone stayed awake until dawn, listening to him breathe. This was the last time she'd ever share a bed with him. The last time she'd pretend everything was okay. By this time next week, Brandon's entire world would be falling apart. And she was going to enjoy every single second of it. Patricia Okonkwo's law office was on the 40th floor of a downtown high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Everything about the space screamed success, from the marble floors to the expensive artwork on the walls. Simone sat in the reception area, her hands folded in her lap, watching lawyers and paralegals move with purpose through the hallways. Nicole had gotten her this meeting within 24 hours. Patricia didn't usually take clients on such short notice, but Nicole had worked at the firm long enough to know that Patricia loved cases involving cheating husbands and hidden assets. She loved them even more when she could prove financial fraud. Ms. Mitchell? A woman in her 50s with silver hair and a sharp navy suit appeared in the doorway. I'm Patricia. Please come in. Patricia's office was immaculate. Law books lined the shelves and degrees from prestigious universities hung on the walls. She gestured for Simone to sit in one of the leather chairs across from her desk. Nicole told me a bit about your situation, Patricia began, opening a legal pad. But I'd like to hear it from you. Start from the beginning. Simone pulled out her phone and showed Patricia the mall video. She watched the attorney's expression remain neutral, professional. When the video ended, Simone showed her the photographs of the bank statements, the messages from the secret phone, the lease agreement. Patricia took her time reviewing everything. She made notes, asked questions about dates and amounts. When she finally looked up, her eyes were sharp. How long have you been married? 6 years. But we dated for 2 years before that. And the business? When did you start it? 9 years ago. I was 23, fresh out of college. I started planning small events, birthday parties, baby showers. It grew from there. By the time I met Brandon, I was doing corporate events and weddings. Big ones. When did he join the business? After we got engaged about 7 years ago. He was working in marketing and I needed help. He was good with clients, good at sales. So I brought him on. After we got married, he convinced me to add his name to everything. Said it would be better for taxes, for legal protection. Patricia's pen moved rapidly across the legal pad. Do you have the original business documents? The ones from before he was involved?
Yes.
Everything.
Good.
What about the money he's been taking? Can you prove those withdrawals came from business accounts?
Simone nodded.
I took photos of all the statements. He's been transferring about $3,000 a month into this secret account. It's been going on for over a year. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Here's what we're looking at. First, the infidelity itself. That's grounds for divorce. But what makes this case special is the financial fraud. If he's been taking money from a business you can prove was yours before marriage, that's theft. Embezzlement. We can pursue criminal charges.
Criminal charges?
Simone felt something shift in her chest. Not guilt, satisfaction.
Absolutely.
But we need to be strategic about this. We file for divorce first. We freeze all business accounts. We get a restraining order preventing him from accessing or transferring any more money. Then we let the evidence speak for itself.
What about the mistress?
Patricia's expression hardened. She's not relevant to the legal case unless she knowingly participated in financial fraud. But her existence supports our narrative, that your husband has been living a double life at your expense, literally. The judge will take that into account. They spent the next hour going over strategy. Patricia explained that they'd need to move quickly, before Brandon realized what was happening. They'd need to secure documents, freeze accounts, and establish a timeline of his theft. She recommended hiring a private investigator to gather additional evidence.
I know someone, Patricia said, writing down a name and number.
Jerome Carter. He's expensive but he's good. He'll be able to track your husband's movements, confirm the affair, document any additional financial misconduct. The more evidence we have, the stronger our case.
Simone took the paper.
How long will this take?
The investigation?
A few weeks. But we can file preliminary paperwork immediately. I'll need you to gather every business document you can find. Tax returns, contracts, bank statements, everything. And I'll need a retainer. Patricia slid a contract across the desk. The number at the bottom made Simone's eyes widen. $50,000.
I know it's a lot, Patricia said.
But I promise you by the time we're done you'll get every penny back and more. Your husband has been stealing from you. We're going to make sure he returns it all, plus damages. Plus my fee. Simone thought about the money in their savings account. Money she'd earned through years of hard work. Money Brandon had probably already calculated as half his.
Do it.
Whatever it takes. They shook hands and Simone left the office feeling something she hadn't felt in days. Hope. Not the naive hope that Brandon would change or that they could fix their marriage. The cold, sharp hope that justice was coming. She called Jerome Carter from her car. He agreed to meet her that afternoon at a coffee shop downtown. When she arrived, he was already there, a tall man in his 40s with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. Patricia called ahead, he said after they'd ordered. She told me what you're dealing with.
I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. Just help me prove everything. Jerome pulled out a small notebook. I'll need some information. Where does he work? What are his routines? Where's the apartment? Simone gave him everything she knew. She showed him the messages that mention locations, restaurants, times. Jerome took notes, asked clarifying questions. He was thorough, professional. I'll start today, he said. I'll tail him for a week, document everywhere he goes, everyone he meets with. I'll get photos, videos, receipts. By the time I'm done, you'll have enough evidence to bury him. How much will this cost? $5,000 for the week. More if you need me longer. Simone nodded. It was worth it. All of it was worth it. That evening, she went home and started gathering documents. She pulled every file from the home office, photographed every page. Tax returns from 9 years ago showing the business was solely hers. Contracts she'd signed long before Brandon was involved. Bank statements showing her initial investments, her income, her growth. She stored everything in a safety deposit box at a bank across town, somewhere Brandon would never think to look. Then she made copies and gave them to Patricia. Every piece of paper was ammunition. Brandon came home around 9 carrying takeout. Thought we could have dinner together, he said, kissing her cheek. I know I've been working a lot lately. I miss you. Simone smiled and took the food. They ate at the kitchen table, making small talk about their days. Brandon seemed relaxed, unsuspecting. He had no idea that his wife had spent the day with a divorce attorney and a private investigator. No idea that his entire world was about to implode. I was thinking, Brandon said between bites, maybe we should take a vacation. Get away for a week. Just the two of us. That sounds nice, Simone replied, her voice steady. Where were you thinking? Maybe Hawaii? Or the Caribbean? Somewhere we can relax. Simone nodded, knowing full well that vacation would never happen. By the time Brandon's busy season was over, he'd be served with divorce papers and facing criminal charges. She went to bed early, claiming a headache. Brandon followed an hour later, and once again she pretended to be asleep. Once again she listened to him breathe, counting down the days until she'd never have to share a room with him again. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jerome. First day of surveillance complete. Already have interesting material. We'll update you tomorrow. Simone smiled in the darkness. The trap was closing. Brandon just didn't know it yet. Jerome's first report arrived 3 days later, delivered in a thick manila envelope that Simone picked up from his office. She sat in her car in the parking lot and opened it, her hands steady now that she'd moved past shock into cold determination. The photos were damning. Brandon leaving work early, driving to Candace's apartment. Brandon and Candace at a doctor's appointment, his hand on her belly in the waiting room. Brandon shopping for more baby items. Brandon at restaurants, at parks, at maternity stores. All during hours he'd told Simone he was in meetings. But the most interesting discovery wasn't about the affair. It was about the money. Jerome had managed to track down more financial records through his connections. There wasn't just one secret account. There were 3. And the money Brandon had been taking wasn't just from their business. It was from multiple sources. Simone spread the documents across her car seat, her heart pounding as she read through them. Brandon had taken out a credit card in the business's name without her knowledge. He'd charged over $40,000 on it. Baby furniture, jewelry for Candace, rent for the apartment, expensive dinners. All on credit that would be the business's responsibility to pay back. He'd also taken out a loan using their house as collateral. $25,000 deposited directly into his secret account. Simone had no idea about this loan. Her signature on the documents was forged. Jerome had included a handwriting analysis proving it wasn't hers. This is fraud, Jerome had written in his notes. Multiple counts. Credit card fraud, loan fraud, forgery. Your attorney will want to see this immediately. Simone called Patricia from the car. We need to meet. Today. 2 hours later she was back in Patricia's office, watching the attorney's eyes narrow as she reviewed Jerome's report. This changes everything, Patricia said. This isn't just embezzlement anymore. This is systematic financial fraud. The forged signature alone could get him 5 years in prison. Combined with everything else? We're looking at serious criminal liability. What do? We go on the offensive. Immediately. I'm filing an emergency motion to freeze all accounts, personal, business, everything. I'm requesting a restraining order preventing him from accessing any assets. And I'm going to contact the district attorney's office about pressing criminal charges. Patricia picked up her phone and started making calls. Simone watched her work, watched her transform from attorney to warrior. Within an hour, Patricia had scheduled an emergency hearing for the next morning. The judge will see us at 9 a.m., Patricia said. Bring every document you have. Bring the recordings, the photos, everything. We're going to hit him with all of it at once. That night, Simone couldn't sleep. She lay in bed next to Brandon, knowing these were the last few hours before everything exploded. He was scrolling through his phone, probably texting Candace. Probably planning their future. Probably thinking he'd gotten away with it. You okay? Brandon asked, noticing she was awake. You've been quiet lately. Just tired, Simone said. Work has been stressful. Maybe you should take some time off. You've been pushing yourself too hard. The irony almost made her laugh. He was telling her to take time off from the business he'd been stealing from. The business she'd built. The business that was about to be completely hers again. Maybe you're right, she said softly. Brandon put his phone down and pulled her close. I love you, you know that? Simone closed her eyes. I know. She felt nothing. No love, no anger, no sadness. Just a cold, empty space where her feelings for him used to be. He'd destroyed everything and now she was going to return the favor. The next morning, Simone told Brandon she had meetings all day. He kissed her goodbye without suspicion and left for work. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, Simone gathered the last of her personal belongings. She packed her important documents, her jewelry, her clothes. She wasn't coming back to this house. Whatever happened next, she wanted to be ready to walk away completely. Nicole picked her up at 8:30, and they drove to the courthouse together. Patricia was waiting outside the courtroom, impeccably dressed and carrying a briefcase full of evidence. Ready? Patricia asked. More than ready. The hearing was quick and brutal. Patricia presented the evidence systematically: the secret accounts, the forged documents, the credit card fraud, the loan. She showed the judge the timeline of Brandon's affair, the proof that he'd been funding his second life with stolen money. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense, reviewed everything carefully. When she looked up, her expression was severe. "This is one of the most egregious cases of financial fraud I've seen in years," she said. "The evidence of forgery alone is criminal. Combined with the systematic theft from a business, this goes beyond divorce court." She signed the emergency orders without hesitation. All accounts frozen. All assets secured. Brandon was prohibited from accessing anything until the case was resolved. And the judge agreed to refer the case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. "He'll be served with these papers today," Patricia explained as they left the courthouse. "By this afternoon he won't be able to access a single dollar. His credit cards will be declined. His bank accounts will be locked. He'll have nothing." "What about the apartment? What about Candace?" "The apartment lease is in his name, paid through the end of the month. After that, if he can't pay rent, they'll be evicted. That's not your problem. None of this is your problem anymore." Simone felt lighter than she had in days. Weeks, maybe years. She'd spent so long carrying the weight of trying to save her marriage, trying to get pregnant, trying to be enough for Brandon. Now she realized she'd always been enough. He was the one who was lacking. "When will he know?" Simone asked. Patricia checked her watch. "The process server is meeting him at his office at noon. He'll be served with divorce papers and the restraining orders. He'll have 24 hours to vacate your shared residence. If he refuses, the police will remove him. I want to be there when he finds out." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? It could get ugly." "I'm sure." They drove to Brandon's office building and parked across the street. At exactly noon, a woman in professional attire walked into the lobby. 10 minutes later, Simone saw Brandon through the glass doors. He was reading the papers, his face turning red, his hands shaking. He looked up and saw her sitting in the car. Their eyes met across the distance. The expression on his face was one Simone had never seen before: pure panic. He ran out of the building toward her car, but Patricia had anticipated this. She'd called for security ahead of time. 2 guards intercepted Brandon before he could reach them. "Simone," he shouted. "What is this? What are you doing?" She rolled down her window just enough to speak. "I'm doing what I should have done the moment I saw you shopping for your son's clothes with your pregnant girlfriend. I'm protecting myself. I'm taking back what's mine. And I'm making sure you pay for everything you've done. You can't do this. That's my business too." "No," Simone said calmly. "It's my business. It always was. You were just an employee I was stupid enough to marry. But that mistake ends today." She rolled up the window and nodded to Nicole. They drove away, leaving Brandon standing on the sidewalk, still clutching the papers that had just destroyed his life. In the rearview mirror, Simone saw him pull out his phone. Probably calling Candace. Probably trying to figure out what to do next. But there was nothing he could do. Patricia had made sure of that. "How do you feel?" Nicole asked. Simone thought about it. Free. And for the first time in 2 years, she smiled and meant it. The next 24 hours were chaos. Simone stayed at Nicole's apartment while Brandon was forced to pack his belongings and leave the house. Patricia had arranged for a police escort to make sure he didn't take anything that wasn't his or cause any damage. Simone's phone rang constantly. Brandon called over 50 times. She didn't answer. He sent text after text. "Please, we need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. I can explain everything. Don't throw away our marriage." She blocked his number. Candace tried calling too, from a number Simone recognized from the secret phone. She blocked that number as well. She owed neither of them an explanation, a conversation, or a single moment of her time. But other calls started coming in, calls Simone actually wanted to answer. The first was from Dion, the accountant who'd been handling the business books for 3 years. "Simone, I just heard. I need to talk to you. It's important." They met at a small diner the next morning. Dion was a short woman in her 40s with glasses and a no-nonsense attitude. She slid a folder across the table before Simone could even order coffee. "I should have caught this earlier," Dion said, her voice tight with frustration. But Brandon set up the transactions in a way that made them look legitimate. Quarterly bonuses, business expense reimbursements. I didn't question them because he was listed as a partner. "It's not your fault," Simone said, opening the folder. "But here's the thing, I started digging after your attorney contacted me. The amounts don't match up. Brandon claimed expenses that never happened. Bonuses that were way above what we'd agreed on. Over the past 2 years, he's taken about $90,000 that he wasn't entitled to. Simone's hands tightened on the folder. $90,000. That was enough for a down payment on a house, enough to expand the business, enough for the fertility treatments they'd been waiting to afford. I've documented everything, Dion continued. Every fake receipt, every inflated expense report, every unauthorized withdrawal. Your attorney will want to see this. This isn't just theft, this is wire fraud. Federal charges. Will you testify? Absolutely. What he did is inexcusable. I've worked with you long enough to know how hard you've built this business. He's been stealing your dream right in front of your face. Simone added Dion's documentation to the growing pile of evidence. Each new piece felt like another nail in Brandon's coffin. The second ally came from an unexpected place. Tasha, one of their biggest clients and the owner of a major tech company, called that afternoon. I heard through the grapevine what's happening, Tasha said. And I want you to know, my loyalty is with you. Brandon might have handled some of our account, but you're the genius behind every event you've planned for us. The vision, the execution, that's all you. Thank you, Simone said, her throat tight. That means everything. More than that, I want to make sure you know that if Brandon tries to start his own competing business, he won't get our contracts. I've already spoken with 5 other CEOs who work with you. We're all in agreement. You're the talent. He's just the guy who showed up to meetings. Simone felt tears pricking her eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep planning our events. We've got a product launch in 3 months. I want you handling it. And I'm doubling the budget as a show of faith. After they hung up, Simone sat in Nicole's living room staring at her phone. She'd been so afraid that the scandal of her divorce would destroy her business. She'd worried that clients would see her as unstable, as too much drama. Instead, they were rallying around her. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Claire, another major client who owned a chain of high-end boutiques. I heard what Brandon did, Claire said without preamble. Men like that make me sick. Listen, I'm hosting a charity gala in 6 weeks. Huge event, lots of press. I want you to plan it. And I want everyone to know that you're the one running the show. Best way to rebuild is to show everyone you're still the queen of this industry. Claire, no arguments. I'm sending over the contract today. And Simone? Take him for everything he's got. He deserves it. By the end of the week, Simone had secured 5 new major contracts, all from clients who wanted to show their support. The business wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Patricia called with more good news. The DA is moving forward with criminal charges. Brandon's looking at multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. His attorney is trying to make a deal, but the DA isn't interested. They want to make an example out of him. What kind of sentence is he looking at? If convicted on all counts? 5 to 10 years. And that's being conservative. He'll also be ordered to pay full restitution. Every penny he stole, plus interest and damages. Simone closed her eyes. She didn't feel joy at the thought of Brandon in prison. She didn't feel satisfaction. She just felt tired. Tired of carrying the weight of his betrayal. Tired of being angry. But she wasn't done yet. There was still one more thing she needed to do. She called Brandon's parents. They'd always been kind to her, had welcomed her into the family with open arms. They deserved to know the truth. Brandon's mother, Helen, answered the phone. Simone, honey, we've been so worried. Brandon said you two were having problems, but he wouldn't tell us details. What's going on? Helen, I need you and Robert to come over to Nicole's apartment. There's something I need to show you. They arrived an hour later, both looking concerned. Simone had prepared everything, the mall video, the messages from the secret phone, the financial documents. She showed them without commentary, letting the evidence speak for itself. Helen started crying halfway through. Robert sat in stunned silence, his face growing redder with each piece of evidence. This can't be right, Robert finally said. Brandon wouldn't do this. I have bank statements, Robert. I have video. I have his own text messages admitting everything. He's been living a double life for 2 years, and he's been paying for it with money he stole from me. Helen covered her face with her hands. That girl he's with, she's pregnant? 7 months. Oh God. Helen looked up, her eyes red. Simone, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. If I'd known. You couldn't have known. He hid it from everyone. Robert stood up, his hands shaking. We raised him better than this. I don't understand how he became this person. He made his choices, Simone said quietly. And now he has to live with the consequences. What can we do? Helen asked. How can we help? Just tell the truth if anyone asks. Don't cover for him. Don't make excuses. That's all I need. They hugged her before they left, both of them crying. Simone knew that conversation had been hard for them, but it was necessary. Brandon needed to understand that his actions had consequences beyond just legal trouble. He'd lost the respect of his family. He'd lost the life he'd built. He'd lost everything that mattered. And it was exactly what he deserved. That night, Simone sat in Nicole's spare bedroom and made a list of everything she wanted to accomplish in the next 6 months. Finalize the divorce. Secure full ownership of the business. Expand into new markets. Hire more staff. Maybe even open a second office. She wasn't going to let Brandon's betrayal define her. She was going to use it as fuel. She was going to build something so successful, so impressive, that everyone would know she never needed him in the first place. Nicole knocked on the door and came in with 2 glasses of wine. You doing okay? Yeah, Simone said, and she meant it. I actually am. Patricia called me today. She said Brandon's attorney is begging for a settlement. He wants to avoid trial. What did she say? She told them no. She said you deserve your day in court. That you deserve to watch him answer for what he did. Simone took a sip of wine and smiled. She's absolutely right. Tomorrow she had meetings with new clients. Tomorrow she had plans to make, events to coordinate, a business to grow. Tomorrow she had a life to build, one that didn't include Brandon in any capacity. But tonight she allowed herself to feel proud. Proud that she hadn't fallen apart. Proud that she'd fought back. Proud that she was still standing while Brandon's world crumbled around him. She'd won. Not just legally but emotionally. She'd refused to be a victim. She'd refused to let him break her. And that, more than any court victory, felt like true justice. Patricia scheduled the family meeting for a Sunday afternoon at Simone's house. The house Brandon had been forced to leave 2 weeks ago. Simone had reclaimed the space, changed the locks, and removed every trace of him. The photos from their wedding were gone. His clothes had been donated. The office he'd used for his lies was now empty, waiting to be converted into something useful. She'd invited everyone who mattered. Brandon's parents Helen and Robert, her own mother Denise, Nicole, and Patricia. Brandon wasn't invited, but he was about to be confronted with a roomful of people he'd betrayed or disappointed. Actually, that wasn't quite right. Brandon was coming, he just didn't know it yet. Patricia had arranged for him to receive a message claiming there was an emergency settlement meeting at the house. He'd be expecting his attorney and maybe Simone. What he'd find instead was a room full of witnesses to his shame. Denise arrived first, her face drawn with worry. She'd been devastated when Simone told her about the affair, had wanted to confront Brandon herself. Simone had convinced her to wait, to let this moment be more strategic. Baby, are you sure you want to do this? Denise asked, squeezing Simone's hands. This is going to be hard. I'm sure, Mom. Everyone needs to see exactly who he is. No more hiding. No more secrets. Helen and Robert came next, both looking older than they had 2 weeks ago. The shame of what their son had done had aged them. Helen hugged Simone tightly. We talked to Brandon last night, Helen said quietly. Tried to convince him to take responsibility, to settle this quietly and make amends. He refused. He actually thinks he can win in court. He can't, Patricia said from her position by the window. She was watching the street, waiting for Brandon to arrive. The evidence is overwhelming. He's going to lose everything. Nicole was setting up the television, connecting it to a laptop. On the screen would be the mall video, the one that started everything. Simone wanted that to be the first thing everyone saw. He's here, Patricia announced. Simone's heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She'd rehearsed this moment in her mind 100 times. She knew exactly what she was going to say. Brandon walked through the front door using the garage code that hadn't been changed yet. Patricia had insisted on this, wanting him to feel comfortable entering. He came into the living room expecting a private meeting and stopped dead when he saw everyone assembled there. What is this? He looked at Simone, confusion and anger flashing across his face. What's going on? Sit down, Brandon, Simone said, her voice calm. I'm not sitting down until you tell me. Sit down. This time there was steel in her voice. Brandon's father stood. Son, do what she says. Reluctantly, Brandon sat on the couch. He looked around the room at all the faces staring at him. His parents. His mother-in-law. Nicole. Patricia. And finally, Simone. I think it's time everyone saw the truth, Simone said. She nodded to Nicole, who pressed play on the video. The mall footage filled the screen. Brandon and Candace shopping for baby clothes. Brandon kissing her pregnant belly. Brandon selecting matching family outfits, his face full of joy and love. Brandon paying for everything with a card Simone had never seen. Helen gasped. Denise made a sound like she'd been punched. Robert's face turned stone cold. Wait, Brandon said, standing up. Let me explain. Sit down, Robert commanded. You'll speak when you're given permission. Brandon sat, his face red, his hands trembling. The video ended, but Nicole wasn't finished. She pulled up the bank statements next, projecting them on the screen. The secret accounts. The transfers. The credit card charges. All of it documented, all of it damning. Over 2 years, Patricia said, her voice clinical, your son stole approximately $90,000 from the business Simone built. He used that money to fund an affair, to rent an apartment, to support another woman and her unborn child. But it gets worse. Nicole clicked to the next screen. The forged loan documents. He forged Simone's signature to take out a $25,000 loan against their house. He committed fraud. Multiple counts. And he did it all while telling Simone they couldn't afford fertility treatments. While telling her they needed to wait to start a family. While watching her cry every month when another pregnancy test came back negative. Denise stood up and walked over to Brandon. For a moment, Simone thought her mother might hit him. Instead, she just looked at him with disgust. You are not a man, Denise said quietly. You're a coward, a thief, and you don't deserve my daughter. Helen was crying openly now. Brandon, how could you? How could you do this to someone who loved you? Mom, you don't understand. Then explain it, Simone said, standing up. Explain to everyone here why you did this. Explain why you stole from me. Explain why you built a life with another woman while I was at home believing in our marriage. Brandon's mouth opened and closed. He looked around the room, searching for sympathy, for an ally. He found none. I never meant for it to go this far, he finally said. It started out innocent. Candace and I were just friends. But then feelings developed and I didn't know how to stop it. So you just kept lying? Nicole interjected. Kept stealing? Kept living 2 lives. It's not that simple. Actually, it is, Patricia said. You made a choice. Every day for 2 years you chose to betray your wife. You chose to steal money. You chose to commit fraud. Those were all conscious decisions. Brandon turned to Simone, his eyes pleading. Baby, please. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll end things with Candace. I'll pay back the money. Just give me another chance. Simone stared at him, at this man she'd spent 8 years of her life loving. She tried to remember what it felt like to want his touch, to crave his attention, to believe in their future together. She felt nothing. I saw you at the mall 3 weeks ago, she said. I watched you pick out clothes for your son. I watched you kiss your girlfriend like she was your whole world. And you know what I felt? Not heartbreak. Not anger. I felt free. Simone. I'm not finished. She walked closer to him, needing him to hear every word. You stole more than money from me, Brandon. You stole years. Years I spent trying to get pregnant, wondering what was wrong with me, going to doctors and taking tests and feeling like a failure. All while you were starting a family with someone else. Do you have any idea how cruel that is? I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. Over and over again. Every lie, every stolen dollar, every night you spent in her bed was a choice to hurt me. And now you have to face the consequences. Brandon stood up, his voice rising. So what, you're just going to destroy my life? Take everything I've worked for? Have me arrested? You destroyed your own life, Simone said calmly. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth. The business is half mine. No, it's not. I have 9 years of tax returns proving it was solely mine before you were ever involved. I have documents showing that I built it from nothing. You were an employee I was generous enough to promote. That generosity is over. Brandon turned to his father. Dad, please. Talk to her. Make her understand. Understand what? Robert's voice was cold. That my son is a thief and an adulterer? That he's humiliated his wife and his family? There's nothing to understand, Brandon. You did this. But I'm your son. And you've embarrassed us. Disgraced us. Your mother and I taught you better than this. Brandon looked around the room one more time, desperate. When his eyes landed on Simone again, she saw something shift in his expression. The pleading turned to anger. You're really going to do this? He said. You're going to press charges? Send me to prison? The district attorney is pressing charges, Patricia corrected. Simone doesn't have a choice in that. When you committed fraud, you committed a crime. The state has an interest in prosecuting you. This is insane. I'm not going to prison. That's not your decision, Patricia said. You'll be arraigned next week. I suggest you get a good attorney, though I doubt it will matter. The evidence is overwhelming. Brandon's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Simone thought he might do something violent. But Robert stood up, positioning himself between his son and everyone else. You need to leave, Robert said. Now. This is my house too. No, Simone said. It's my house. My name is on the deed. You have no legal right to be here. If you don't leave, I'll call the police. Brandon looked at her with hatred now, all pretense of love gone. You're going to regret this. No, Simone said. I don't think I will. Patricia stepped forward, her phone already in her hand. Leave now, or I'm calling the police for trespassing and violation of the restraining order. Brandon stormed out, slamming the door so hard that a picture frame fell off the wall and shattered. The sound echoed through the house, and then there was silence. Helen was still crying. Denise put an arm around her, offering comfort to the woman whose son had betrayed them all. I'm sorry you had to see that, Simone said to Brandon's parents. But I needed you to understand why I'm doing this. Don't apologize, Robert said gruffly. He deserves everything that's coming to him. More even. After everyone left, Simone stood in her living room alone. The house felt different now, lighter somehow. Like Brandon's presence had been a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Simone showed it to Patricia, who was packing up her briefcase by the door. That's harassment, Patricia said. Forward it to me. We'll add it to the case. He's really going to fight this, isn't he? He'll try. But he can't win. The evidence is too strong. Give it a few weeks. Once he realizes he's going to lose in court, once his attorney explains the prison time he's facing, he'll try to settle. They always do. And if he doesn't? Patricia smiled. Then we go to trial. And we bury him. After Patricia left, Simone walked through the house, room by room. In the would-be nursery, she stood in front of the rocking chair she'd bought years ago. She'd imagined sitting there, holding her baby, singing lullabies. That dream was gone now. But maybe that was okay. Maybe it was time for new dreams. Better dreams. Dreams that didn't involve a man who'd proven he couldn't be trusted. She pulled out her phone and opened the Notes app. Started making a list. Expand the business. Hire new staff. Open a second location. Travel to places she'd always wanted to go. Take risks she'd been too afraid to take. Build a life that was entirely hers. Brandon had taken so much from her. But he couldn't take her future. That was still waiting, still possible, still full of potential. And for the first time in weeks, Simone felt excited about what came next. The arraignment was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Simone didn't have to attend, but she wanted to. She wanted to see Brandon's face when the charges were read aloud, when the reality of his situation finally sank in. Patricia met her outside the courthouse, professional and prepared as always. Remember, you're just an observer today. Don't react to anything. Don't speak to him or his attorney. Let the process work. The courtroom was smaller than Simone expected. A few other people sat in the gallery, waiting for their own cases to be called. Brandon sat at the defense table with his attorney, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Judge Martinez was a stern woman in her 50s who'd apparently seen every type of case imaginable. She looked bored as she shuffled through her files. The People versus Brandon Mitchell, the clerk called. Brandon stood, his attorney beside him. He looked thinner than he had 2 weeks ago, his suit hanging loose on his frame. For a brief moment, Simone felt a flicker of something that might have been pity. Then she remembered the mall video, the forged documents, the stolen money. The feeling vanished. Mr. Mitchell, Judge Martinez said, you're charged with 9 counts of fraud, 3 counts of forgery, and 6 counts of embezzlement. How do you plead? Brandon's attorney spoke before he could. Not guilty, Your Honor. The judge nodded, unsurprised. Bail is set at $100,000. Trial date will be scheduled within 90 days. Next case. That was it. Less than 5 minutes and Brandon's fate was set in motion. As he was led out of the courtroom to process bail, his eyes found Simone's. He looked angry, desperate, lost. She looked away. Outside the courthouse, Patricia lit a cigarette, the only vice Simone had ever seen her indulge in. His attorney is going to try to negotiate. Give it 48 hours. She was right. 2 days later, Patricia called with news. Brandon's lawyer wants to meet. They're offering a settlement. He'll plead guilty to reduced charges, pay full restitution plus $50,000 in damages, and you'll drop the opposition to a quick divorce. What kind of prison time? 2 years, probably out in 18 months with good behavior. He'd avoid the more serious charges. Simone sat in her office, surrounded by contracts for new events, proposals for expansion. The business was thriving. She was thriving. Brandon was becoming irrelevant. Tell them no, she said. I want to go to trial. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Are you sure? Trials can be unpredictable and emotionally draining. I'm sure. He doesn't get to avoid consequences just because it's inconvenient. He needs to face what he did in front of a jury. Then we go to trial. The next few weeks were consumed with preparation. Patricia deposed witnesses, organized evidence, built a timeline of Brandon's crimes. Jerome provided additional surveillance footage showing Brandon and Candace together at various locations, establishing the pattern of deception. Meanwhile, Simone focused on her business. Tasha's product launch was in 2 weeks, and it needed to be perfect. Claire's charity gala was being planned down to the smallest detail. Simone threw herself into work, finding solace in creation, in building something beautiful. But Brandon wouldn't go quietly. His harassment escalated. He showed up at the office one afternoon, demanding to speak with Simone. Security removed him. He sent emails from new addresses, claiming he'd been framed, that Simone had manipulated the evidence. Patricia filed for restraining order extensions. Then Candace called. Simone was in the middle of a client meeting when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She ignored it. The number called again. And again. Finally, during a break, she answered. Stop calling me. Please just listen. Candace's voice was shaky, tearful. I didn't know. About everything, I mean. Brandon told me you two were separated, that the divorce was already in process. Simone felt anger rise in her chest. And you believed him? He seemed so genuine. He showed me an apartment, said it was his new place after leaving you. I didn't know he'd stolen money. I didn't know about the fraud. What do you want, Candace? I need you to know I'm sorry. And I need help. Brandon's bail money came from his parents, but now he has nothing. He can't pay rent. Can't support the baby. I'm due in 6 weeks and I don't know what I'm going to do. Simone closed her eyes, fighting the urge to say something cruel. This woman had slept with her husband, had carried his child while Simone suffered through miscarriages. But she'd also been lied to, manipulated. She was a victim too in her own way. I can't help you, Simone said. I'm sorry you're in this situation, but Brandon's problems aren't my responsibility anymore. And neither are yours. But the baby is Brandon's child, not mine. You need to figure this out with him or without him. But leave me out of it. Simone hung up and blocked the number. She felt no satisfaction, no vindication. Just exhaustion. That evening, Nicole came over with takeout and wine. They sat on Simone's couch, eating pad thai and watching old movies. Candace called me today, Simone said during a commercial break. Nicole nearly choked on her wine. What did she want? Money, probably. Help, definitely. She says Brandon told her we were already divorced, that she didn't know about the fraud. Do you believe her? Simone thought about it. I don't know. Maybe. Does it matter? Not really. She made choices too. She chose to get involved with a married man, even if she believed his lies. That's on her. She's having a baby in 6 weeks. And that's very sad for the baby. But it's not your problem to solve. Simone knew Nicole was right. She'd spent too much of her life trying to fix things that weren't her responsibility. Brandon's mess, his consequences, his collateral damage, none of it was hers to manage. A week before the trial, Patricia called with unexpected news. Brandon's attorney just filed for a psych evaluation. He's claiming emotional distress, diminished capacity. He's trying to argue he wasn't in his right mind when he committed the crimes. That's ridiculous. I agree. But it's a common defense tactic. If he can prove he was suffering from depression or anxiety, he might get a reduced sentence. Can they do that? The judge will have to approve it. But even if she does, I don't think it'll help him much. The crimes were too calculated, too sustained over time. This wasn't a moment of poor judgment. This was years of deliberate deception. The psych evaluation was granted, but it backfired spectacularly. The psychologist's report, which Patricia obtained through discovery, showed that Brandon exhibited signs of narcissistic personality disorder and a profound sense of entitlement. He believed he deserved the money he'd taken, that Simone should have been more understanding of his needs. This actually helps us, Patricia explained. It shows consciousness of guilt. He knew what he was doing was wrong, but he felt entitled to do it anyway. That's not diminished capacity. That's just being selfish. The week before trial, Simone received flowers at her office. No card, but she knew they were from Brandon. She threw them in the trash without a second thought. She also received an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. Simone, I know you hate me right now. I know you think I'm a monster. But I need you to understand that I never meant to hurt you. I got lost. I made mistakes. But I still love you. I still believe we could fix this if you just give me a chance. Please drop the charges. Please forgive me. I'm begging you. Brandon. Simone read it once, then tore it into pieces. She photographed the pieces and sent them to Patricia with a message, more harassment. Add it to the file. Patricia replied immediately, will do. Also, excellent restraint. See you in court Monday. Sunday night, Simone couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the trial. Tomorrow, Brandon would have to face what he'd done in front of a jury. Tomorrow, witnesses would testify about his fraud. Tomorrow, the mall video would be shown to strangers who would judge him, find him guilty, send him to prison. She felt no joy about it. No satisfaction. Just a deep, abiding certainty that justice needed to be served. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nicole. You ready for tomorrow? Simone typed back, more than ready. This ends now. And it would end. One way or another, tomorrow would mark the beginning of the final chapter in her relationship with Brandon. After tomorrow, after the trial, after the verdict, she would finally be free to move on completely. She fell asleep thinking not about Brandon but about her future. About the business she was building. About the life she was creating. About the woman she was becoming, stronger, wiser, and absolutely unwilling to settle for anything less than she deserved. While the criminal trial date loomed, Patricia had been simultaneously fighting on another front, the business. Brandon's attorney had filed an emergency motion claiming that Brandon was entitled to half of the business assets as marital property. If successful, it would have forced Simone to either buy him out or sell the company entirely. Patricia had been preparing for this fight from day one. The morning before the criminal trial was set to begin, they had a separate hearing in civil court regarding business ownership. Simone arrived at the courthouse with boxes of documents. 9 years of tax returns. Business licenses from before her marriage. Bank statements showing her initial investments. Contracts she'd signed with clients before Brandon was ever involved. Email chains proving she'd built the company from nothing. Brandon's attorney, Gerald Hutchinson, was a shark in an expensive suit. He'd made his reputation defending wealthy men in divorces, finding loopholes, exploiting technicalities. He smiled at Simone with condescension as they took their seats. This should be straightforward, Your Honor, Hutchinson began. Mr. Mitchell has been a partner in this business for 6 years. He's entitled to his share of the marital assets. Judge Reeves, a black woman in her 40s with a sharp mind and no patience for nonsense, raised an eyebrow. Ms. Okonkwo, your response? Patricia stood, commanding the room with her presence. Your Honor, the business in question was established by Ms. Mitchell 9 years ago, 3 years before she married Mr. Mitchell. She has documentation proving sole ownership and operation during those 3 years. Mr. Mitchell was hired as an employee after they became engaged. His name was added to certain business accounts, but ownership was never transferred. We have documents showing he was listed as a partner, Hutchinson countered. Bank signature cards and business credit cards, yes, Patricia agreed. But no operating agreements transferring ownership. No corporate documents showing a change in structure. Ms. Mitchell can provide testimony from her accountant, her attorney, and her business banker, all of whom will confirm that the company remained solely hers throughout the marriage. Judge Reeves leafed through the documents Patricia had filed. Ms. Mitchell, when did you start this business? Simone stood. June 2016, Your Honor. I was 23 years old, fresh out of college. I started planning small events, birthday parties, baby showers. I used my savings and a small loan from my mother. By 2018 I was doing corporate events. That's when I met Brandon. And when did he become involved in the business? After we got engaged in 2019. He was working in marketing at a tech firm. I needed help with client relations and sales. So I hired him. As a partner? As an employee. I paid him a salary. After we got married, I added his name to some accounts to make banking easier, but I never transferred ownership. The business license, the LLC registration, the tax ID, everything remained in my name. Hutchinson stood again. Your Honor, Mr. Mitchell contributed significantly to the growth of the company during his 6 years of involvement. His expertise in marketing and client relations doesn't make him an owner, Patricia interrupted. Employees contribute to company growth. That's why they receive salaries. Mr. Mitchell was well compensated for his work. He received a base salary of $85,000 annually, plus bonuses. He didn't invest his own money. He didn't risk his own assets. He didn't build this company from the ground up. Judge Reeves turned to Hutchinson. Do you have any documents showing ownership transfer? Operating agreements? Corporate resolutions? Hutchinson shuffled through his papers. We have his name on the business bank accounts. We have his signature on contracts with clients. As an authorized signer and representative, Patricia said. Not as an owner. There's a difference. The judge nodded slowly. Ms. Okonkwo, call your first witness. Dion, the accountant, was sworn in. She testified clearly and confidently about the business structure, the tax returns, the ownership documentation. She explained that she'd prepared returns for 9 years, and in all that time, Simone had been listed as the sole proprietor. Even after they married? The judge asked. Even after, Dion confirmed. Ms. Mitchell kept the business structure separate from her personal finances. This is actually smart tax planning, keeping a business that predates marriage as separate property. And Mr. Mitchell's financial contribution? There wasn't one. He received a salary like any other employee. He didn't invest capital. He didn't guarantee loans. He was paid very well for his services, but he didn't have an ownership stake. Next, Patricia called Mark Chin, the business attorney who'd helped Simone set up her LLC. He testified about the original formation documents, confirming that only Simone's name appeared on any ownership paperwork. Did Mr. Mitchell ever attempt to formalize a partnership? Patricia asked. He mentioned it once, Mark said. About 3 years ago. He wanted me to draw up documents making him a 50-50 partner. I told him that would require Ms. Mitchell's consent and would have significant tax implications. He never followed up on it. This was news to Simone. She'd never known Brandon had tried to formally claim ownership. The fact that he'd given up suggested he knew he didn't have a legitimate claim. Finally, Patricia called Simone to the stand. She testified about building the business, about the sacrifices she'd made, about the years of work before Brandon was ever involved. Did your husband ever invest his own money in the business? Patricia asked. No. He received a salary, but he never contributed capital. The business grew because of client relationships I'd built, because of my vision and work. And after you married, did you ever discuss making him an owner? He asked me once. I said I'd think about it, but I never actually did it. The business was mine. I'd built it before we were married and I wanted to keep it separate. Hutchinson's cross-examination was aggressive. He tried to paint Simone as controlling, as someone who'd excluded her husband from something that should have been shared. But Simone remained calm, factual. Isn't it true that Mr. Mitchell worked 60-hour weeks for your company? He worked hard, yes. And he was paid well for it. Didn't he sacrifice his own career opportunities to help you grow the business? He left a job that paid $70,000 to work for me at $85,000 plus bonuses. That's not a sacrifice. That's a raise. The courtroom was silent. Hutchinson tried a few more angles, but Simone had answers for everything. The truth was on her side. Judge Reeves took only 15 minutes to deliberate. When she returned, her expression was stern. I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony, she began. And it's clear to me that Ms. Mitchell established this business years before her marriage. She invested her own capital, took her own risks, and built a successful company through her own work. Mr. Mitchell was an employee, albeit a well-compensated one. But employment doesn't equal ownership. Hutchinson started to object, but the judge held up her hand. Furthermore, the evidence shows that Mr. Mitchell not only wasn't an owner, but that he actively stole from the business. The criminal charges pending against him include embezzlement from this very company. I find it particularly audacious that he now claims to own the business he was stealing from. Simone felt relief wash over her. Patricia squeezed her hand under the table. My ruling is as follows. The business known as Mitchell Events and Planning belongs solely to Ms. Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell has no ownership claim. Additionally, given that the business name includes his surname, I'm ordering that Ms. Mitchell has the right to rebrand without his consent. The judge looked directly at Brandon, who'd been sitting silently at the defense table. Mr. Mitchell, You were given opportunities in this business that many people would dream of. You were trusted, paid well, and given responsibility. Instead of honoring that trust, you betrayed it. You stole from your wife's company, you lied about your contributions, and now you're trying to claim ownership of something you never built. I find your behavior reprehensible. Hutchinson tried one last time. Your Honor, we'd like to appeal. You can appeal all you want, Judge Reeves said. But the facts are the facts. This hearing is concluded. Ms. Mitchell retains sole ownership of her business. Outside the courthouse, Simone couldn't stop smiling. Patricia pulled out her phone and made a call. Who are you calling? Simone asked. A branding consultant I know. You're going to need a new business name. Something that's entirely yours. I suggest you do it before the criminal trial ends so when the media covers this story, they're talking about your new brand, not Brandon's legacy. That evening, Simone sat in her office surrounded by her team, Nicole, Dion, and 3 of her senior event planners. They brainstormed names, threw out ideas, laughed at the ridiculous ones. What about Simone Laurent Events? Nicole suggested. Laurent was Simone's maiden name. Too formal, Simone said. Luxe Events by Simone, one of the planners offered. Better. But still not quite right. They went through dozens of options. Finally, Dion said something that clicked. You're always talking about creating moments people remember. What about Unforgettable Events by Simone? Simone felt something shift. That was it. That was perfect. I love it. Within 48 hours, Patricia had filed all the paperwork for the name change. The rebranding was swift. New logo, new website, new business cards. By the time the criminal trial started, Simone's company had a new identity that had nothing to do with Brandon. The press picked up on it immediately. Local businesswoman rebrands after husband's theft, read one headline. She built the business, now she's taking back her name, read another. Clients responded enthusiastically. Tasha posted on social media, proud to work with at Unforgettable Events by Simone, a woman who turned betrayal into triumph. Others followed suit, sharing their support. The business didn't just survive Brandon's betrayal. It thrived because of how Simone responded to it. She'd shown strength, intelligence, and resilience. She'd proven that she didn't need him, had never needed him. 2 days before the criminal trial was set to begin, Simone received an email from Brandon's mother, Helen. Simone, I know you have every right to hate our family. But I wanted you to know that Robert and I are proud of how you've handled this situation. You've shown more grace and strength than Brandon deserves. We're praying that justice is served and that you can move forward with your life. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Simone replied simply, thank you. That means everything. She didn't hate Helen and Robert. They'd raised their son with values he'd chosen to ignore. They were as much victims of his deception as she was, just in different ways. That night, Simone stood in her newly branded office, looking at the logo on the wall. Unforgettable Events by Simone. It was more than a name. It was a statement. A declaration that she'd survived, that she'd rebuilt, that she'd come out stronger. Brandon had tried to take her business. He'd failed. He'd tried to take her future. He'd failed. All he'd succeeded in doing was revealing his own weakness while highlighting her strength. And now, with the business secure and thriving, she was ready for the final battle. The criminal trial would determine Brandon's freedom. But Simone had already won the war that mattered most. She'd won her life back. The criminal trial began on a cold Monday morning in November. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters who'd been following the case. Businessman faces fraud charges after wife discovers affair, had become a local sensation. Simone had declined all interview requests, letting the facts speak for themselves. Inside courtroom 4B, Simone sat in the gallery with Nicole and her mother. Patricia wasn't representing her in the criminal case. That was the district attorney's job, but she'd come to observe, to offer support. The DA, a serious man named James Cordero, had a reputation for being thorough and unforgiving when it came to financial crimes. He told Simone weeks ago that he wanted to send a message. Fraud wouldn't be tolerated, especially when it involved betraying the trust of a spouse and business partner. Brandon sat at the defense table in a suit that looked too big on him now. He'd lost weight, his face gaunt and tired. His attorney, Hutchinson, looked confident despite the overwhelming evidence. Simone knew he was good at his job, knew he'd try to create reasonable doubt, paint Brandon as a victim of circumstance rather than a criminal. But the evidence was undeniable. Jury selection took 2 days. Cordero wanted people who understood business, who could follow complex financial testimony. Hutchinson wanted people who might sympathize with Brandon, who might see his affair as a personal failing rather than evidence of criminal intent. In the end, they seated 12 jurors, 6 women, 6 men, ranging in age from 25 to 62. They looked skeptical and serious, ready to hear the truth. Opening statements began on Wednesday. Cordero stood before the jury, his voice clear and firm. Over the next week, you're going to hear about a man who lived 2 lives. In one life, he was a devoted husband, a hard-working employee, a man who promised his wife they'd start a family together. In the other life, he was having an affair, planning a future with another woman, and systematically stealing money to pay for it all. He paused, letting that sink in. Brandon Mitchell didn't just betray his wife emotionally. He betrayed her financially. He stole $90,000 from the business she built. He forged her signature on loan documents. He opened credit cards in the business's name without her knowledge. And he did all of this while telling her they couldn't afford to start a family, while watching her suffer through miscarriages, while pretending to be the supportive husband. Cordero walked closer to the jury box. The defense will try to tell you that this was a mistake, that Mr. Mitchell made poor choices because of emotional distress. But the evidence will show you something different. It will show you a calculated, deliberate pattern of theft that lasted over 2 years. This wasn't a mistake. This was a crime. And at the end of this trial, I'm going to ask you to hold Mr. Mitchell accountable for what he's done. Hutchinson's opening statement was smoother, more polished. He painted Brandon as a man who'd fallen in love unexpectedly, who'd made mistakes trying to navigate impossible circumstances. My client isn't a criminal, Hutchinson said. He's a man who found himself in a complicated situation. Yes, he had an affair. Yes, he took money that he shouldn't have. But these actions came from a place of emotional confusion, not criminal intent. Brandon Mitchell was drowning, trying to keep everyone happy, trying to do right by both the women in his life. He made mistakes, certainly. But mistakes don't make someone a criminal. Simone watched the jury's faces. Some looked skeptical. Others seemed more sympathetic. It was impossible to tell which way they'd lean. The prosecution's case was methodical and damning. Cordero called Dion first, who walked the jury through the financial records. She showed them how Brandon had set up fake expense reports, how he'd transferred money into secret accounts, how he'd covered his tracks by manipulating the books. Could these transfers have been accidental? Cordero asked. Absolutely not, Dion replied. These transactions required deliberate action. He had to create fake invoices, forge approval signatures, transfer funds between multiple accounts. This wasn't a mistake. This was a system. Next came Jerome, the private investigator. He testified about following Brandon for a week, about the evidence he'd gathered. Photos of Brandon and Candace together were shown to the jury. Videos of them shopping for baby items, entering her apartment, acting like a couple. In your professional opinion, Cordero asked, was Mr. Mitchell trying to hide this relationship? Absolutely, Jerome said. He used cash for most purchases. He parked his car blocks away from the apartment. He deleted text messages. He changed his phone settings to hide notifications. Everything about his behavior suggested he knew what he was doing was wrong and was actively trying to conceal it. Hutchinson's cross-examinations were aggressive but ineffective. He couldn't discredit the financial records. He couldn't explain away the forged signatures. He couldn't deny the video evidence. On the third day, Cordero called Simone to the stand. She walked to the witness box calmly, placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. She looked out at the courtroom and saw Brandon watching her, his expression unreadable. Cordero began gently. Ms. Mitchell, can you tell the jury how you met the defendant? We met at a business networking event 8 years ago. He was working in marketing. I just started growing my event planning business. We started talking, found out we had a lot in common and started dating. And when did you marry? 6 years ago. October 2019. Can you describe your marriage? Simone took a breath. I thought it was good. We both worked hard. We talked about starting a family. I had trouble getting pregnant and Brandon was always supportive. Or so I thought. When did you first discover something was wrong? 3 weeks before I filed for divorce. I saw Brandon at the mall with another woman. She was pregnant. They were shopping for baby clothes together. The courtroom was silent. Simone continued, describing what she'd seen, how she'd felt, what she'd done next. She testified about finding the secret phone, about discovering the financial fraud, about realizing the extent of Brandon's betrayal. Did you have any idea he was taking money from your business? None. I trusted him completely. He had access to the accounts because I thought we were partners, building a future together. I never imagined he was stealing from me. How did you feel when you discovered the truth? Devastated. Betrayed. Foolish for trusting him. But also angry. I'd worked so hard to build that business, and he'd been treating it like his personal bank account. Hutchinson's cross-examination tried to paint Simone as controlling, as someone who'd driven Brandon away with her obsession with getting pregnant. Isn't it true that you pressured Mr. Mitchell about starting a family? We both wanted children. That was something we discussed before we got married. But you became fixated on it, didn't you? To the point where it became the only thing you talked about. Simone met his eyes. I wanted a family with my husband. I didn't think that was unreasonable. What I find unreasonable is that while I was going through fertility treatments and suffering miscarriages, he was starting a family with someone else using money he stole from me. Several jurors nodded. Hutchinson moved on quickly. The defense's case was weak. Brandon testified in his own defense, which Simone knew was a risky move. He claimed he'd never meant to hurt anyone, that he'd fallen in love with Candace and didn't know how to end things with Simone without causing pain. So you chose to lie and steal instead? Cordero asked during cross-examination. I wasn't thinking clearly, Brandon said. I was overwhelmed. Overwhelmed enough to set up 3 secret bank accounts? Overwhelmed enough to forge your wife's signature? Overwhelmed enough to create fake expense reports month after month for 2 years? Brandon had no good answer. Hutchinson called a psychologist who testified about the emotional stress of living a double life, about how that stress could impair judgment. But Cordero's rebuttal was devastating. Dr. Williams, in your professional opinion, did Mr. Mitchell know what he was doing was wrong? I believe he experienced moral conflict, yes. So he knew it was wrong but he did it anyway? That's one interpretation. Doctor, is there any evidence that Mr. Mitchell suffered from a mental illness that prevented him from understanding right from wrong? No, but no further questions. Closing arguments came on Friday afternoon. Cordero was powerful, reminding the jury of all the evidence, all the lies, all the deliberate choices Brandon had made. This wasn't a mistake, Cordero said. This was a pattern of criminal behavior that lasted over 2 years. Brandon Mitchell knew exactly what he was doing. He chose to betray his wife. He chose to steal from her business. He chose to commit fraud. Now you must choose to hold him accountable. Hutchinson's closing was emotional, asking the jury for mercy, suggesting that Brandon had already lost everything and didn't deserve prison time on top of that. He's lost his wife, his business, his reputation. Isn't that punishment enough? But when Simone looked at the jury, she saw no sympathy in their eyes. Deliberations took less than 4 hours. When the jury returned, their faces were serious, resolved. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. The foreman stood. We have, Your Honor. On the count of fraud in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of forgery? Guilty. On the count of embezzlement? Guilty. 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 On all counts. Brandon's face went white. His attorney put a hand on his shoulder, but there was nothing to say. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later. Brandon was remanded into custody immediately, led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. As he passed Simone's row, he looked at her one last time. She looked back without expression, without anger, without satisfaction. Just acknowledgement that justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Simone made a brief statement. I'm grateful for the jury's decision. This was never about revenge. It was about accountability. My hope is that this case reminds people that betrayal has consequences, that theft is theft regardless of the relationship, and that no one is above the law. I'm ready to move forward with my life now. She didn't take questions. She walked to Nicole's car with her head high, free at last. 2 weeks later, Brandon was sentenced to 7 years in prison with possibility of parole after 5. He was also ordered to pay full restitution, $90,000 plus interest and damages, totaling over $120,000. Candace had her baby 3 days after the sentencing. A boy. She named him after her father, not Brandon. Simone heard about it through the grapevine but felt nothing. That child deserved a good life, but it wasn't her responsibility to provide it. Brandon would spend the next several years in prison, and when he got out, he'd be broke, unemployed, and marked as a convicted felon. He'd lost everything, his wife, his reputation, his freedom, his future. And Simone? She'd won everything that mattered. Her business, her freedom, her self-respect, and her future. Just as it turned out, was exactly as sweet as she'd hoped. 6 months after the trial, Simone stood in the main room of her new office space. It was twice the size of the old one, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture, and a conference room that could seat 20 people. The sign outside read "Unforgettable Events by Simone," in elegant silver letters. Business had tripled since the trial. Apparently, people loved supporting a woman who'd turned betrayal into triumph. Her client roster now included Fortune 500 companies, celebrity weddings, and high-profile charity galas. She'd hired 6 new employees and was training them to uphold the standard of excellence she'd built. Claire's charity gala 6 months ago had been covered by 3 major news outlets. Tasha's product launch had been so successful that she'd contracted Simone for 5 more events this year alone. Every client who'd worked with Brandon and Simone before now made it clear. They were staying with Simone. "You ready?" Nicole appeared in the doorway holding 2 glasses of champagne. Tonight was the grand opening celebration for the new office. Over 100 clients, vendors, and friends were coming to toast Simone's success. She'd never felt more ready for anything in her life. "Born ready," Simone said, taking a glass. They clinked glasses and drank. Through the windows, the city lights sparkled in the early evening. Simone's life had been completely rebuilt, brick by brick, event by event. She was no longer the woman who'd stood in that mall watching her husband betray her. She was someone stronger, fiercer, more resilient. The guests started arriving at 7. Simone worked the room like the professional she was, thanking people for their support, discussing future projects, making connections. She wore a stunning navy dress that fit her perfectly. She'd lost 15 pounds over the past 6 months, not from stress but from finally prioritizing herself. She'd started going to the gym, eating better, sleeping more, taking care of herself in ways she'd neglected while married to Brandon. Around 8:30, her mother Denise pulled her aside. "Baby, I am so proud of you. Look at what you've built. Look at how strong you are." "Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have. But I'm glad I got to be here to see it." Denise squeezed her hand. "And I have to say, there's someone here who's been staring at you all night." "Tall gentleman by the window?" "Very handsome." Simone followed her mother's gaze and saw him. Thomas Hayes. He was an architect she'd worked with on Tasha's product launch. He'd designed the space for the event, and they'd spent weeks collaborating on the layout, the flow, the aesthetic details. He was brilliant at his work, funny without trying too hard, and respectful in a way that felt genuine rather than performative. They'd grab coffee a few times to discuss the project. Then dinner, supposedly to finalize details. Then another dinner that had nothing to do with work. They'd been seeing each other casually for 2 months, taking things slow. Simone wasn't ready to rush into anything, and Thomas seemed to understand that. He caught her eye and smiled. She smiled back. "He's a good one," Denise said. "Nothing like Brandon." "No," Simone agreed. "Nothing like Brandon." Later, when the party had thinned out and only close friends remained, Thomas approached her with a fresh glass of champagne. "Congratulations," he said. "This space is incredible. You're incredible. Thank you. And thank you for coming. Wouldn't have missed it." He paused, then added, "I was wondering if you might want to have dinner this weekend. Somewhere nice. A proper date, not a work meeting disguised as one." Simone smiled. "I'd like that." They talked for another hour, standing by the windows watching the city lights. Thomas told her about a project he was working on, a community center in a neighborhood that desperately needed one. She told him about her plans to expand the business to other cities, maybe even internationally. "You're going to do amazing things," Thomas said. "I already am," Simone replied. Not arrogantly, just truthfully. When the last guest left around midnight, Simone stood alone in her beautiful new office and took it all in. The success, the freedom, the possibilities. She pulled out her phone and looked at her calendar. Next month she was flying to New York for a major corporate event. The month after that, she was hosting a wedding for a client in Miami. Her schedule was packed, her bank account was growing, and her future was limitless. She thought about Brandon briefly, not with anger or sadness, but with something close to gratitude. Not gratitude for what he'd done, but gratitude for what his betrayal had forced her to become. She'd been comfortable in her marriage, maybe too comfortable. She'd been content with good enough. Now she demanded excellence. From herself, from her work, from anyone she let into her life. Brandon was 3 months into his 7-year sentence. She'd heard through Helen that he was struggling in prison, that reality had finally hit him. Candace had moved back to her hometown with the baby, cutting off all contact with Brandon. His parents visited him occasionally, but even they were disappointed and distant. Simone felt no satisfaction in his suffering. She just felt neutral about it. He'd made his choices and now he was living with them. That was his journey, not hers. Her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Had a great time tonight. You inspire me." She smiled and replied, "See you this weekend." Another text came through, this one from Patricia. "Congratulations on the new office. You deserve every bit of success coming your way. Also, Brandon's final restitution payment cleared today. You're officially compensated for everything he took." $120,000 deposited back into her business account. Money that would fund her expansion plans, her new hires, her future growth. Simone locked up the office and walked to her car. The night air was cool and fresh. She drove home to the house that was now entirely hers. Brandon's name had been removed from the deed, and she'd redecorated every room to reflect her taste, not his. In her bedroom she looked at the space that used to hold so much pain. The bed where she'd pretended to sleep while Brandon lied beside her. The dresser where she'd hidden her tears. The bathroom where she'd cried over negative pregnancy tests. All of that was gone now. In its place was peace, comfort, pride in what she'd overcome. Simone changed into comfortable clothes and poured herself a glass of wine. She sat on her couch with her laptop and started reviewing proposals for a new project. A destination wedding in Italy. The client had a budget of $300,000 and wanted something unforgettable. That's what Simone did. She created unforgettable moments. She turned visions into reality. She made magic happen. And she did it all herself, without a lying husband dragging her down, without someone stealing from her dreams, without anyone's permission or approval. At midnight, she closed her laptop and walked out onto her balcony. The stars were bright, the moon was full, and the world felt wide open with possibility. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, broken, betrayed, uncertain about her future. That woman had been strong enough to walk away, smart enough to gather evidence, brave enough to press charges. That woman had rebuilt her life from the ground up. But the woman she was now, she was unstoppable. Simone raised her wine glass to the sky, to herself, to the future she was creating. To new beginnings, she whispered. To justice, to freedom, to me. And somewhere in the distance she could have sworn she heard the universe whisper back, "You earned it." She had. Every single bit of it. And this was just the beginning.